It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to The Phil Ferguson Show. Later on the show, we have an interview with Andrew Seidel. He is an attorney working for the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the FFRF, and you're going to really enjoy that interview, so hang on for that. Before we get to that, I'm going to talk about a couple of different mutual funds. Sometimes funds come to my attention. A listener might say, I've been recommended this by an advisor, or I already own this. What do you think of it? And sometimes companies email me mutual funds and say, you should sell this to your clients. Unfortunately for them, apparently they don't know that if they send me some shit, I'm going to talk about their product on the show. So mutual fund companies and product placement companies, be advised. Thank you for sending me emails with your stuff so I can talk about it and educate my listeners. I'm going to look at a website called Morningstar.com. And this is part of the investing skeptically or skeptical investing that you can go look for this stuff yourself. So the first fund is BlackRock Emerging Markets, and its letters are MDDCX. So you can go look it up yourself. And a couple of things that I like to look for this at Morningstar is the information about, is there a load? I don't like loads, but that's just me. It's a sales commission that you pay to the company that often the vast majority of that goes to the salesperson that sold it to you. And the load on this is 5.25%. So if you invest $1,000, you will lose $52.50 before you even start, which means you have to make 5.25%, 5.5%, maybe 6% to even break even because you didn't invest $1,000, you invested $940 or something. So that's a problem. I don't like that. The expense ratio on this is 1.67. A lot of index funds have expense ratios below 0.2, and some of them are below 0.1. And for comparison, the Vanguard Emerging Markets Fund is 0.14. That's the Admiral shares, and that symbol is VEMAX. Just so you can compare the two. Back to this BlackRock fund. Another thing that it has is a turnover of 126%, which means if it owns 100 stocks, they bought and sold a stock 126 times during the year. So they're not holding stocks for very long. Also, by comparison, the Vanguard Index Fund has a 6% turnover. So if they own 100 stocks, they only sell 6 of them in a year. And I have to wonder, what is a company doing? I mean, obviously it's not buy and hold. You'd think that you would do research, carefully decide what you're going to buy, and you think it's going to be a good long-term investment. You're going to hold it for a while. But with a turnover 126%, you're buying and selling everything more than once in a year. That means you're holding things maybe 9 or 10 months on average. Well, what was the research that you did that told you to buy it? That 9 to 10 months later, now it says it's crappy and you should sell it. That's absolutely staggering. Another thing that is very important for an investor, if you have a holding like this in a taxable account, you don't get to take advantage of long-term capital tax rates of 0, 15, or 20%, depending on your tax bracket, because the holdings are switched so fast that almost everything you make, if it goes up, you are going to lose and pay the marginal tax rates for your income tax. So instead of paying maybe 15, you might pay 24 to low 30s, depending on your income bracket. So that's a big hurt. So they've got to do even better than that. Another thing that's a problem with this fund, and it's very common with a lot of mutual funds, is they're holding 8% of the money in cash. which is really staggering considering their turnover rate. They can't use the regular argument a lot of times I'll hear is that we're waiting for good buys. We're waiting for something to really pique our interest. Well, apparently it doesn't take a whole lot to pique your interest with a turnover of 126%. So why are you sitting on 8% cash? And that 8% is doing nothing. It's not going to make you money. If you want cash in your portfolio, you should have control over that and have a money market or a cash position. You don't want your mutual funds just randomly holding a whole bunch of cash. It's not productive. And again, for reference, the Vanguard fund has 1.8% cash. I'd still like it to be lower, but at some point they have to have funds available for redemptions or to be able to buy things. But 8% is getting pretty high. Another thing I like to look at Morningstar is the category called Top Holdings. And this BlackRock fund, the 5 biggest stocks are 19% of the portfolio. So that concerns me because you're really betting on a handful of stocks, not the entire emerging markets. But, it's not that big of a deal. The Vanguard fund, the top 5 holdings are 14%. So a little lower. Still, I wouldn't like it to be that big, but big companies do dominate portfolios, and it's kind of a problem. So, that's what we're looking at. The 5-year performance for the BlackRock fund is 4.69% per year. And the Vanguard one is 4.15. So it hasn't done worse, but that doesn't include the 5% that you paid up front. So if you owned it for 5 years, you're basically losing 1% or more per year. So if I was to choose the two, I would go with the Vanguard Emerging Market Index Fund, lower expense ratio, more tax efficient, better returns expected, and better returns in the last 5 years when you take into account the load that you did not pay up front. My second example is something that I got a spam email about. The amount of emails that I get from companies wanting to sell shit to you is truly staggering. Sometimes dozens per day. Most of them get caught by the spam filter. A few get through. Every once in a while, I read over one, and this one caught my interest. It's called Sparrow Growth A. And its claim to fame is that in the magazine Kiplinger, it was listed as the #1 large company stock fund for performance on 1 year. So I thought, wow, this has got to be great. And the 1-year return through June 30th of 2018, according to Kiplinger, this fund made 47%. And so you might look at this and say, wow, this fund made 47% in 1 year. That's absolutely staggering. And it is absolutely staggering, but will it continue to do that? And has it been able to do that in the past? So we're going to look at that here in a minute. A couple things to know. First of all, again, it's a load fund, 5.75%. So you lose almost 6% of your money just getting in. And we thought the previous fund had a high expense ratio. This expense ratio is 2.65% per year. So they have to beat the market by 2.65% just to break even on their performance. And that's not including the load. So if you bought this and paid the load and owned it for 5 years, you lose roughly 1 to 1.25% per year because of the load. And then you lose another 2.65. So you're going to lose almost 4% per year on the performance. Another factor, the turnover is 256%. 256%. So everything they own, they're selling 2.5 times per year. Nice thing is that it has almost no cash, and 97% of the money is in the U.S. stock market, but it's the super high growth stocks. So they're picking stocks that are the biggest winners, and it's kind of like a hot hands thing. They're chasing the hottest stocks. So they're probably whatever stocks have gone up the most in the last few months, they're buying them, and when they stop being hot, they dump them. And so it's kind of it sounds more like a tactical fund than anything, which could induce more risk. And it's not something that I like to do as an investment strategy. As an example of some of the problems they had, even though they have done well in 17 and the first half of 18, In 2016, when the S&P 500 was up 12%, they lost 4.5%. In 15, when the market was up 1.4, they lost 1. In 2014, when the market was up almost 14%, they made 1. So they've beaten the market a few percentage points, several percentage points in the last year. But in the long run, most years they underperform significantly to dramatically, which is kind of what I would expect with an incredibly high expense ratio. And so this is going to be more volatile. And of course, if it's in a taxable account, almost everything that you make on this fund, if it goes up, you're going to pay marginal tax rates on it. Again, 24 to 28 to 32% or higher, depending on your income level, versus 0, 15, or 20 on long-term capital gains. The other thing that they often do, and this is kind of tricky, is that they'll compare a fund like this to the S&P 500 or the total market, which I think it's more appropriate since it's definitely going with large cap stocks to compare it to that. And its long-term return is 8% per year, whereas the long-term growth fund or the large cap growth fund from Vanguard, the index fund, is 11% a year. So it's underperforming by about 3% a year, which, no surprise, is about equal to its expense ratio. So you kind of get it, and it's hot right now, and the money is going to pour in. I don't know if they've raised their load, but 5.75%, odds are you're going to underperform by 3% or more a year, not including the 5.75% that you lose up front. And again, it's investing in a lot of the same stocks that the Vanguard Large Cap Growth Fund is doing. So in the long run, do you want to make closer to 10 or closer to 6? So that's kind of what we're looking at with the Sparrow Growth. It had a fantastic 12 months, maybe even a fantastic 18 months. But most of the years before that, at least for the data that I can see, it's underperformed almost every single year. So odds are that it would likely underperform many years going forward. The third fund for today is not just a shitty fund. I'm going to call it a new category, super shitty fund. The expense ratio, I'm sorry, got to tell you the fund name. Hussman Strategic Growth. The symbol is HSGFX. Hussman Strategic Growth. And this is something that a client had in their previous portfolio when they came to hire me. They'll probably know who they are because we had a nice talk about it. And they were pretty good-natured about how they got screwed with this fund, but this is not meant to point out that they made a mistake or that their advisor, well, maybe it is a point to make that their advisor sold them something crappy. This is not something that is a mark against you as the investor or the listener or even this potential client or actual client, but just as a learning example, things that you can look for. And the previous two funds and this fund, almost all of these, you can just go to Morningstar.com and look at some basic facts. Sometimes people bring me portfolios that are filled with funds that are not so awful. And there's some things I can do to make it better, but they're doing okay. Sometimes I see funds that are just horrible, awful investments. And that's the thing that you really want to avoid. I mean, on my scale of 1 to 10, and 1 being terrible investments, 10 being your ideal portfolio, if you can knock out a couple things that are 1s or 2s on that scale, your overall performance and volatility can dramatically decrease. So you want to get rid of the worst things first, even if you have to pay taxes sometimes to get rid of them. So it's kind of a strategic thing. What's hurting you the most? And this fund was definitely something that was hurting this investor the most. And the nice thing about it is it's never made money. So we didn't actually have to pay any taxes. The investor got a tax write-off with this fund. What luck. It lost so much money that you got to save some money in taxes. Again, HSGFX. The expense ratio, not horrible compared to the average managed fund, 1.31%. Again, index funds, 0.2% or lower. Turnover is 209. So they're selling everything that they own twice in a given year. And again, I don't like that if it's in a taxable account, assuming it made money, which it didn't, which is why it's a super shitty fund. The next thing I'm looking at is the allocation. Again, this is at Morningstar.com. The amount of cash currently in this fund is 55%. And that sounds bad, but wait, it gets better. The percentage of the fund that's in the U.S. stock market is 93%. That's right. You heard that correctly. 55% is in cash and 93% is in the U.S. stock market. And you might think, Phil, you must be mistaken because those two numbers add up to more than 100%. And I would say, you're absolutely right. The next category is non-U.S. stocks. The portfolio currently consists of negative 52% non-U.S. stocks. So more than half the money is in cash. Almost 100%, over 90% is in U.S. stocks. And then another half is negative international stocks. So this is a fund that is playing crazy-ass games. For example, in its top holdings, the single biggest holding is a options contract, and I'm sure this is for the non-U.S. stocks. 58%, negative 58% of the portfolio is a call option on international investments. Absolutely staggering. So this is someone who's doing some things that are way too fucking creative. And it's probably not a new process because the 10-year performance on this fund, which I guess is listed as a U.S. general market fund, so comparing it to the S&P 500 is reasonably acceptable. Its performance, 10-year average is minus 7% per year. Minus 7% per year, where the U.S. stock market, as measured by the S&P 500, is up 10% per year. So this is underperforming the stock market by 17% per year. 17% underperformance per year. It looks like this fund is designed to take your money. I can't think of any other way. Of course, they would never say that. And of course, a court would never find that to be the case. But it just looks like you can't win with this fund in the long term. I mean, I'm looking back through time and they had a couple years in the early 2000s where they made money. And what probably happened was whatever creative thing that they're doing worked for a couple of years. And so advisors would sell it. And it's one of the things that I have problems with new funds, because a company can make 10 funds. They're called incubator funds. They run them for a couple of years. The ones that are crappy, they kill. You never hear anything about. And then you get a couple that do really well and they promote it to you. Some salesperson says, hey, this fund has been going for 2 years and it's beaten the market by 10% per year for the last 2 years. And sure, the expense ratio is a little high and this one has no load. So it's a good investment and they put it in part of your portfolio, just like the person that showed it to me. And then once they bring in all the money, it underperforms dramatically and the expenses are high and it just does awful. So, some things to look at. Check out your own statement. You should have gotten something from June 30th. You should get your statements every quarter. You might get them every month if there's significant activity. But go through some of the investments. Look them up. Almost every investment has a 5-letter code if it's a mutual fund. Almost always 3 or 4 if it's an ETF. If you can't figure out what the symbol is, you can send me a copy, but don't do that first. Send me an email. Make sure you actually have me and we can talk about it. But go understand what you own. You may own some shitty funds and maybe you own super shitty funds. And if nothing else, if you have 1 or 2 that are really awful, getting rid of those couple of funds and putting them in index funds could make a really big difference in the long run. And so I'm going to wrap up this segment. We're going to take a little break, and then we'll come back and talk about the separation of church and state, the FFRF, with Andrew Seidel.
This survey of American beliefs showed that Americans, at a rate of between 48 and 51%, don't believe in evolution. which is like half. And on top of that 50-odd%, a further 38 to 40% of Americans believe that biological evolution has occurred, but believe that it was initiated by and has since been kind of administered by God. Leaving a very small percentage of Americans who are right. It's not my theory. But I've done material about evolution before, and in Australia and in Britain it barely raises an eyebrow. It's just worth a chuckle. But in America it's quite contentious to do comedy about evolution, you know. It gets a gasp. It's the equivalent of doing material about fisting anywhere else, you know. It's quite confronting for them. I've been heckled by a man in the front row in New York loudly defending his disbelief in evolution. I've been pulled aside in foyers by people defending their disbelief in evolution in the same terms, interestingly enough. It's the same defense that the intelligent design movement uses in the high courts of American states to try and sneak its pseudoscience into American high schools. And that defense is always, but evolution is only a theory. Which is true. I mean, it is a theory, and it's good that they say that. I think it gives you hope, doesn't it? That maybe they feel the same way about the theory of gravity. And they might just float the fuck away.
Pace e lunga vita. Lunga vita e prosperità.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Of course, you are still listening to the Phil Ferguson Show. With me today, I have Andrew Seidel. How are you, sir?
I am well. Thanks for having me on.
And I can't even keep track of your title now at the FFRF. What's the fancy schmancy title now?
I am FFRF's Director of Strategic Response. I'm still a constitutional attorney. I just have a fancy new title now. So, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, no big deal. No big deal.
So, at the beginning here, at least, here's what I'm thinking for the interview. We're going to talk to you as if you're an employee of the FFRF, and you're going to tell us all about the cool shit that they're doing. And then if time allows, we'll transition to Andrew the citizen, and maybe we'll talk about some more fun stuff. How's that sound?
That does sound fun. Also, I have like an official announcement about my book that I have been saving for you because you've been such a good supporter. I thought we would do it on your podcast, and then I can maybe, when I say like I've made a big announcement on Phil's podcast, send some people your way too.
That's nice. So let's not tell anybody about the book yet.
Okay. Okay.
That'll be the tease for later in this interview.
Okay.
So Freedom from Religion Foundation, who are they and why do you work there? What's going on?
So we are the nation's largest association of free thinkers. That's atheists, agnostics, anybody who puts reason and logic and common sense before dogma, whatever label you choose to give yourself. And we have two purposes. We work to keep state and church separate, so we are insanely busy these days. And then we also work to educate the public about non-theism, what it is to be a non-believer in America. So those are kind of the two main goals. We have a huge headquarters up in Madison, Wisconsin, but we have members in every single state, 32,000. We have chapters all over the country. We have a convention every year that's really awesome this year. It's in San Francisco, and I'm really excited for it. And it's, as far as I'm concerned, it is one of the reason I came to work at FFRF is because of the work that it does keeping state church separate. We're on the cutting edge. We're on the forefront. We are the watchers on Jefferson's wall of separation between state and church. And I just absolutely love the work that we do.
Well, one thing I want to cover before we get too excited about other things, which we will, the convention, it's November 2nd through 4th. Is that right?
Correct.
And that's this is July. So we've got a couple of months, but it's getting close.
And I will say, too, it's already filling up fast, actually.
Well,
People are really excited about this one.
I'm not surprised, and it's a neat trick that the FFRF can pull off a conference and attract people to an expensive city like San Francisco.
Yeah, and I think part of that is, the convention itself is, at least in terms of, comparisons, it's relatively cheap to get into. And if you're a member of FFRF, I think it's really, really affordable. So if you're near San Francisco at all, you really ought to consider coming. But a lot of people are flying in for it. I mean, we've got Salman Rushdie, who we've been trying to get for years. I'm really excited about. Cecile Richards, the former president of Planned Parenthood, Sarah Hayter, Leanne Lord, Julia Sweeney. I mean, we've got a really great lineup. People can find it on ffrf.org. It's going to be a really good one, I think. I'm very excited for it.
Well, they're all good ones. And I know last year it was something like 800 plus people. Is that right?
I don't remember the number from last year, but the biggest one we've had was Portland with Richard Dawkins, which I think was just shy of 1,000. And I think this time, based on where the numbers are, they're thinking it's going to break that record.
Very nice.
Yeah, and we have Jared Huffman, Representative Jared Huffman from California's 2nd District. He is the representative who just started the Free Thought Caucus. He came out as a non-religious American a few months ago. And started a caucus in the U.S. Congress to support freethinkers and to support the wall of separation between state and church and science-based legislation. He's going to be there. It's a really exciting lineup.
Well, let's talk about that Free Thought Caucus since you mentioned it. It only has a few people, and some of them aren't even public. Is that correct?
So far, yes. I mean, it just started. Let me see, not even 2 months ago now. And as these things it takes a little while to build up. But we have been working with Huffman's office and a number of the other offices to try to build up the profile of the caucus and, have more people join on. And there actually have been a number that have already joined on since the beginning. I can't remember where it stands right now. I want to say 7. But, it's early, and we expect this to grow significantly, especially as the non-religious ranks of the American citizens grow.
Oh, absolutely. And what was it called again? Free Thought Caucus?
The Free Thought Caucus.
Oh.
So that was started by Representative Jared Huffman, Jamie Raskin of Maryland, and McInerney of California as well. So it's a really it's a great new caucus. I mean, there's never been this kind of representation for free thought and free thinkers in the U.S. Congress before.
I know.
It's a really exciting time.
It's it's way too small, but it's bigger than we had last year.
It's significantly bigger than we had last year.
So we have that. And of course, we talked about the conference. We have the Free Thought Caucus, which is getting up and started. And you guys are helping. That's not your thing per se. It's from the elected officials.
Yes.
And FFRF occasionally does lawsuits. Can you tell me about a nice win or two that have happened recently?
We've been known to take a lawsuit or two. One of the big wins we had recently was out of New Jersey. And this was a case where the county, Morris County, was taxing citizens of the county and then giving that taxpayer funds to churches. Now, ostensibly, this was part of a historic preservation program, but the churches were writing in their grant applications things like, if you don't give us this money, we won't be able to continue worshiping in this building. Without this funds, we won't be able to keep praying to God in our building. So the grants were actually going to fund religious worship.
Yeah, clearly.
Yeah, and so we took that case. We lost it before the county judge at the lowest level. She was very hostile to our position all the way through to the case. And the county was so excited that they actually asked the appellate court, so normally you go from the trial court to the appellate court to the Supreme Court of whatever body, and then the U.S. Supreme Court if you're in the state. The county actually asked the Supreme Court of New Jersey to skip the appellate court. And the Supreme Court of New Jersey agreed, which had us a little bit worried, but we won a unanimous decision before the New Jersey Supreme Court striking down these grants because they violated the New Jersey state constitution. And, one of the big arguments in the case, and one of the big arguments nationally right now is, Phil, is what is religious freedom, right?
Yeah.
On the right, they're arguing that religious freedom is my right to do whatever I want, no matter how it impacts others, even if it discriminates against others. And sometimes I can even use the government to facilitate that religious freedom. And that's what they were arguing here, right? Like we get access to taxpayer funds so that we can continue to worship. And as we pointed out, that's not what religious freedom has ever meant.
Right.
This is an active campaign to redefine religious freedom, to weaponize religious freedom. And what we try to point out and hammer home, in which the judges at the New Jersey Supreme Court agreed with, is that the religious freedom right here, it exists with the taxpayers, right? When the founders were writing our state constitutions and our federal constitution, the thing they were most concerned about was using the coercive taxing power of the government to take money from citizens and give it to favored churches. That's establishing a religion. And that's exactly what happened here. And that's exactly what the New Jersey Supreme Court struck down. And they said, no, the right here lies with the taxpayers not to be taxed in a way that violates their religious beliefs or lack thereof, which was very important.
Yeah.
So,
and what was it? Conscious freedom of choice? What was the one phrase the founding fathers often had about that?
They used to talk regularly about the freedom of conscience.
Yeah.
I think it's more. I think today it's better for people to conceptualize religious freedom as two different things, right? There's your right to believe, which is absolute, right? The government cannot ever infringe your right. You can believe whatever you want. You can believe that water turns into wine if somebody says a few magic words over it. You can believe that the earth is 6,000 years old. You can believe that there is an alien named Xenu who released evil spirits and that makes people depressed. You're free to believe all those things. You're wrong, but you're free to believe all those things. But what you can't do is act on those beliefs within unlimited warrants.
Right. You can't act in a way that harms another.
Exactly. So the right to belief is absolute, but the right to act is not. And that's what the Masterpiece Cake Shop case was about. I mean, and it makes sense when you break it down into those two separate things. And what the religious right has been doing these days is trying to conflate those two and make it seem like the right to religious freedom is the right to act no matter what. This isn't me just inventing this dichotomy out of thin air. The Supreme Court talked about this. Thomas Jefferson talked about this regularly. In fact, both Thomas Jefferson and the Supreme Court, Thomas Jefferson in the 1790s and the Supreme Court in 1878, used an example to show this dichotomy between the right to act and the right to believe. And they'd use child sacrifice, right? So, if God tells you to kill your son, as he did with Abraham, you're free to believe that that's God saying that, but you are not free to go and kill your child. That's called murder, and you go to jail for that. And that makes perfect sense to everybody who you explain it to. But for some reason, then when you say, well, you don't get to discriminate because your God says so, then people get to, well, I don't really know. There's free speech. And anyway.
Yeah, it's tricky. And of course, when I was looking through some of the recent wins, a lot of times you guys win without having to go to court. And
Most of the time.
It often involves schools and local governments. Can you give me an example or two of how that might work out?
Yeah, I think people, first of all, should understand how widespread violations of state-church separation are. It's kind of shocking, but we get about 5,000 complaints every year, and about half of those involve the public schools. And these are not cases where it's borderline, that we've got cases where teachers are telling kids they have to pray before they go eat their lunch. We've got cases where they're broadcasting prayer over the loudspeakers at football games. Those are two things that the Supreme Court has weighed in on, in one case a decade ago, almost 20 years ago, actually, and in another case more than 60 years ago. Very clearly illegal, and they're still happening all the time. And that's one of the reasons that FFRF exists, is because the wall of separation is constantly under assault, and we need watchers on the wall to stop it. But yeah, we are basically, we churn out letters on these kind of issues every single week, 20, 30, 50, 100 letters on violations at this level that we work to stop. And most of them I mean, it's so sad, but most of them involve kids in the public schools, and what you have is people trying to use the machinery of the state to impose their religion on other people's children. And that's just not going to happen while FFRF is around.
Well, it just seems to me that if you require the government to impose your religion on kids, how sad and pathetic and weak is your deity? I mean, come on.
And Benjamin Franklin said something along those lines that we actually included in that Morris County lawsuit. He said that when a religion is good, it doesn't need the support of the state. And when it does need the support of the state, I conceive that it is a bad religion. I mangled that quote, but people can go look it up. So you're in good company there, I think.
Yeah, it's something that to me is pretty obvious, but they can't help themselves. They just always got to scrounge for money because the magical creator of the entire universe can do anything but print money. We know that from George Carlin. And they have to go get money, and hopefully those churches in New Jersey will actually close like they promised without the money, and we can use those buildings for something productive. It always seemed like a weird waste to have this giant spread of buildings not paying any property taxes being used once or twice or 3 times a week.
Yeah, and I mean that one of the interesting things about that is we don't even know how much property churches own. We don't know how much they ought to be paying in taxes. There was a study that came out a couple of years ago that Ryan Cragen did, where he estimated probably about $70 billion is the tax exemption for religion. But really we don't know, and that's because they don't report any financial information to the IRS. So one thing that FFRF does as a nonprofit, we have to track every penny that comes in, every penny that goes out, and then we report all that to the IRS because having a tax exemption is a public trust, and the public gets to look over our shoulders and say, yes, you are good trustees. You are taking this really amazing privilege that we've given you, and you're using it well. And we don't even know that for churches. They're exempt from that reporting requirement, something that FFRF has challenged in lawsuits in the past and that we intend to challenge again in the future.
Wow, just absolutely amazing. I'm just looking at the website, of course, that is ffrf.org. And there's a legal tab where you just list achievements day after day after day. It looks like it's a couple of weeks maybe out of date, but
there's a huge website rebuild and update going on right now. So very soon, I don't know what date, but there's going to be a whole revamp of our website, and it needs it. But it's very, very exciting. Actually, everything will kind of be redone on the legal tab too. And 2 other things to flag for people on the legal tab: they can report a state church violation right there under the legal tab. That's the quickest way to get us to look into a violation. You'll hear from an attorney in-house, usually within a day, unless you report over the weekend. And then also there's a legal FAQ, which if you're wondering, well, hey, does it violate the separation of state and church to have religious music at my kids' 5th grade winter play? We have answers to those type of questions on that legal tab, that FAQ. Is it okay for me to vote in a church, or is having polling stations in churches illegal? That kind of thing.
I like it. Now, I'm looking at the homepage, and since FFRF has it on the homepage, I think it still qualifies as something. But FFRF is not pro Brett Kavanaugh. Is that correct?
That is correct. So one of my jobs as the director of strategic response is to kind of prepare for the worst when it comes to the federal government. So when Kennedy announced his retirement, Justice Kennedy announced his retirement from the Supreme Court, we started looking at the short list of names. And we had done this before, so we had a lot of this research done, but we really started digging in and prepping for any one of it looked like it was going to be one of 4 people probably, and we started prepping for them. Kavanaugh, in my opinion, was the worst of the 4, and he is the one that Trump picked. First of all, we have a president who's under a special counsel investigation that's, yielded, well, actually, I haven't updated my numbers in a while, but yielded at least 5 guilty pleas and 22 indictments so far. So we have a president who's under investigation for colluding with a foreign nation nominating Supreme Court justices. That's a problem right there. Kavanaugh himself has written that he believes that a president should be excused from some of the burdens of ordinary citizenship while serving in office, and that includes investigations. So you have a judge who doesn't think the president should be investigated being nominated by a president who is being investigated. To me, that is a serious problem. It's at the very least the appearance of impropriety, which is prohibited in the Federal Judicial Code of Conduct. So I think that's problematic. But I think the most important thing for listeners to your show to understand is that this guy would be a complete and total disaster for the separation of state and church. I mean, a very, very real disaster for the separation of state and church. And, you know, if you are an FFRF member, or if you are signed up for FFRF action alerts, you knew about the problems with Judge Brett Kavanaugh 2 minutes after his name was announced. That was when our action alert and news release went out, 2 minutes. And if you want to understand the problems and you want to be in the know and, you know, get this information quickly, all you have to do is text FFRF to 52886, and it will walk you through this great automated system. It's super easy to contact your senators and public officials through Twitter, Facebook, email, and directly calling them. And our automated system walks you through all of that. It's very, very easy. All you have to do is put in your name and address, and we need your address because we need to know who your elected officials are. It's really, if you care about these kind of issues, you really ought to be signed up for those alerts. So all you have to do is text FFRF to 52886. But yeah, Kavanaugh is a terrifying prospect for the wall of separation between state and church.
Absolutely. And of course, the Freedom from Religion Foundation doesn't take a position on any candidates, but you take positions on topics, subjects, ideas, policies, right? Is that
absolutely? I mean, and Kavanaugh is not a candidate; he's a nominee.
Absolutely.
And again, you know, he specifically said that the wall metaphor, that wall of separation, was wrong as a matter of law and history. It's a useless guide to judging. He said it's based on bad history. I mean, this is a guy who thinks that history and tradition should trump what the Constitution actually says about state-church separation. So he's a very scary nominee, and he's used language that is really hostile to any of the groups like FFRF that work to keep state and church separate. Actually, today, the Freedom from Religion Foundation is releasing a list of 10 reasons Kavanaugh would be a disaster for the separation of state and church that people can find on our website. And again, if you sign up for those action alerts, you'll be able to get that right away as well.
Well, excellent. If I have access to that, or I get the alert, so I might have it soon. But
it'll be out in about an hour, probably.
All right, I'll try to put it in the show notes, because this is one of those shows. Sometimes I record something and it goes out a week or 2 or 3 weeks later. We're going to go out later today, so I've got to figure out how to put a whole show together by late this afternoon. But so we've got that. And anything else pressing really cool at the FFRF before we get to Andrew Seidel himself as a person?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing that we're really focusing on right now is the Supreme Court. I mean, this is the fight of the century for anybody who is a friend of progressive values, American values, state-church separation. I mean, if you like the vote, if you like clean air, you know, this is a guy that you need to oppose. He's never met a government regulation he would like to allow to stand. So, I mean, this is it. This is the fight. People really need to call their senators. If you don't want to sign up for our system, fine, I understand that. Call your senator, 202-224-3121. That's the Senate switchboard, 202-224-3121. You can call them, and they'll connect you to your senators, and you can say, no, do not let Kavanaugh through, whatever you do.
Yeah, especially if you have a Republican senator.
Especially.
Yes.
Or a red state Democrat.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that we're in a situation where a possibly contestable election result with a definitely detestable individual is getting to a point possibly, well, he did appoint, he appointed, has to be approved and consented, but appointed someone that might side with him that he shouldn't be bothered to be investigated. I can't believe it. Just absolutely stunning.
It is. It really is.
All right. Well, enough of FFRF, and if we go back to it, we'll advise the listener. But you're now going to speak on behalf of yourself, not the FFRF. And the thing that I want to make sure we cover is, and we dropped it earlier in something about a book. Tell me what's this all about?
Well, Phil, I mean, you and I have been talking for how many years about my book?
Yes, indeed.
6 years I've been working on it. 7 years you and I have been talking about it, probably.
And things like this scare me because I fantasize writing a book, but I can't imagine 6 years from now actually having one done.
I mean, it's hard, it's a lot of work, especially the subject that I decided to take a bite out of. It's basically U.S. history, U.S. legal history, politics today. It's I mean, you know what the book is, but for those who haven't heard about it yet, everybody knows the idea of the Christian nation. You've all heard the claim we are a Christian nation, and Phil, you're pretty adept at slapping that down. I think probably a lot of your listeners are too. But there's that fallback claim, right, that we're founded on Judeo-Christian principles.
Yeah, sure we are.
And that's a lot more difficult to fight back against. And that's the claim that I am taking down. And I'm not just disproving it, because that's not enough. I'm also going on the offensive, right? I'm saying that not only was our nation not founded on Judeo-Christian principles, but the Judeo-Christian principles are so opposed to the founding values of the United States that it is fair to say that Christianity is un-American.
I like it. What's the title, by the way?
The title is Un-American. I have a publisher, Sterling Publishing. The manuscript is going to them in about 2 weeks. And it looks right now like it's going to come out in May 2019. And hopefully we'll have some cover art for it in the next month or two. So it's definitely happening. A contract has been signed. Money has exchanged hands. Well, it's gone one way. The book is officially a reality. I have not officially announced it until I was coming on your show, because you've been such a huge supporter. And thank you for that. So, yeah, I mean, Un-American, subtitle to be determined, by Andrew Seidel. And Susan Jacoby, author of Free Thinkers, a biography of Robert Ingersoll, has agreed to write the foreword as well.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, I love her work. So kudos on that. And I was really hoping you were going to tell me it'd be out in time for Christmas, but maybe next Easter.
Yeah. Unfortunately, not for Christmas. I mean, ideally, it would have come out before the midterms, but that's not possible. So, anyway,
I was just wondering if it should have something like a different title to appeal to a different audience, like Christian America. Yeah, and they would see that on the shelf and go, "Oh, I want this."
Yeah, I'm not making any attempt to hide the thesis of it, and I want people to pick this up, and I mean, I think it does have the ability to change minds for sure. It's written that way, but I think I'm not going to be sneaky about it. I want people to pick this up thinking this is going to be ridiculous. I can't wait to tear this apart, and then realize that the history is airtight, rock solid. I mean, I've paid 2 attorneys that I know. I paid them a bounty for every error that they could find in my citations, which are copious. So if I have a quote in there and then I cite to a source that's an original source and they couldn't find that quote in there or couldn't find it elsewhere, then I had to pay them a bounty. I didn't have to give over that much money, actually, but the point being the history, and I think the argumentation is airtight in this.
Well, give me a couple of examples. You said that Christianity might even be un-American. How dare ye?
Yeah.
Where are you getting that shit from, dude?
Well, I mean, the 10 Commandments, first of all. I mean, I am the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods before me. That's how the 10 Commandments begin. That contradicts what we were talking about earlier, that great American principle of religious freedom. And, to say that you have to worship a particular God is a complete violation of religious freedom. That is an un-American law, and it completely contradicts our founding principles. And that's right there in the 10 Commandments.
Well, that's just one of them. I mean, surely the others are fine.
Yeah, actually, the first three or four, depending on which set of Ten Commandments from which religion, from which Bible you're looking at, because there are many different ones. There's actually four sets of Ten Commandments in any given Bible: Exodus 20, Exodus 34, Deuteronomy 5, and Deuteronomy 27. So we have to ask ourselves really which Ten Commandments. But even pretty much the first three or four Ten Commandments in any given Bible would be unconstitutional if they were laws, because they so fundamentally conflict with American values and principles. So that's the Ten Commandments. And actually, the book walks through all of the Ten Commandments, including those on murder and theft and lying. It walks through what I call argument by idiom, which are those silly little phrases that we often hear thrown at us: in God we trust, one nation under God, so help me God. That's the last part of the book. And then I also look at just general biblical principles, things like hell, things like vicarious redemption, and compare those to founding principles. What does it look like if you talk about original sin and then compare that to that principle that is so central to the American justice system, which is innocent until proven guilty? I mean, right? Those are fundamentally in conflict.
Yeah.
So, and then I also there's also a section that's kind of based on, more American history. So it looks at the language of the Constitution. It looks at the Declaration of Independence and the supposedly religious language in there. It looks at the idea that, our nation was founded by people who were fleeing religious persecution and wanted to establish religious freedom, which is itself kind of a big myth. I think people will really learn a lot, both about history and about American law and government from the book. And they'll certainly learn a lot about Christianity and religion in particular.
Excellent. Now, another total different topic. Again, your personal opinions, if you wish to express them. But yesterday, Trump was in Helsinki, bowing down, in my opinion, to the president of Russia. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, actually, Gary Kasparov wrote a really great op-ed in the Washington Post this morning about that I thought best captured at least my feelings on that just appalling show of obeisance. And I mean, it was kowtowing in the worst form. It wasn't America first. It was Russia first. Actually, it was Trump and Putin first. Is really what it was about. That was a very, very sad day for America. I mean, it's hard to have an idea of American exceptionalism after watching that.
Yeah, I keep hoping, but as Trump does things, that some of his fans would see it and go, oh wait. But I have seen people on my Facebook wall. I have a few Trump supporters that keep around just to see what they're saying, and I actually saw people talking about how wonderful of a job he did. I can't wrap my head around it.
No, nor can I. And I think part of it is Fox News is still very much, I mean, you saw what Hannity and Tucker Carlson were saying afterwards. I'm sure, he was a very strong performance according to them. And I think as long as state media, I mean, that's as close as what we have to state media in this nation, exist like that. And Trump didn't stay in their bubble. That's going to be, unfortunately, that they're going to continue to push that narrative. So, I mean, that's until there's a way into their bubble through something like Fox News or their version of state media or Breitbart or something like that, it's going to be hard to not convince them, because convince suggests thought and reason have a role to play, but change their minds.
Is there anything else, either about you, your book, politics, religion, even back to FFRF, if you so choose, that we want to cover that we haven't talked about?
Well, no, I mean, not right now. There's going to be a lot coming up in the very near future. We're awaiting about 6 different decisions. FFRF is awaiting about 6 decisions in our case. There's some movement on a possible repeal of the Johnson Amendment, which is very scary. This is the rule that prevents nonprofits and churches from endorsing political candidates and getting involved in elections. And without it, millions, if not billions of dollars in dark money would flow into churches who could use them as they see fit for politicking.
Yeah.
And if you want to talk about a power grab, that would be just the most ridiculous gift of power to churches that we've seen, at least in the last 100 years in this nation. It would be a very, very big problem. And again, if people want to take action when things like this are going on, text FFRF to 52886 and you'll find out about it right away. But there was a vote last night in the House that made the repeal of the Johnson Amendment a little bit more likely.
Oh.
So yeah, there is a lot going on. I've been doing a lot of writing. I've been writing for Think Progress about a number of different issues, including Kavanaugh and the White House Bible study, which we've been working to stop and at least keep an eye on. Some op-eds for Religion News Service, which is fun. But yeah, life is busy. And there's a lot going on under this administration that we are on the wall of separation between state and church is under attack right now.
Yeah, and it has been for a while, but sometimes it seems to be worse. And I know for me personally, I look forward to the day that I'm not spending so much time worried about emergency crises in our government and can just go back to, and again, this is me personally, attacking the fundamental base of Christianity because I think that feeds into it, but I can't spend enough time fighting the foundation of the problem because it's reared its head, and I got to spend time and effort and thought on that.
Well, and I think people might not realize, and this is something that I talk about quite a bit in the book, is how linked those two things that you just mentioned are. Yeah. I mean, there was a study that came out that Andrew Whitehead did from the University of Clemson that looked at what the number one predictor was for people who voted for Trump in the 2016 election. And it was not religion. It was not political party. It was whether or not they were a Christian nationalist. And that is really what my book works to take down. It works to take down the Christian nationalist identity and the myths that support that identity. So Christian nationalism is this idea that the United States was founded as a Christian nation and that we need to return to those foundations, right? That we've strayed from it and we have to get back to what made America great. It's right there in Trump's slogan. And if you adhered to that belief, that mindset, that was the number one predictor for whether or not you would vote for Trump. So Christian nationalism, which is what my book takes down, is what put Donald Trump in the White House.
Yeah, scary stuff. If someone wants to talk to you about FFRF, or you speaking somewhere, how can they contact you?
I think one of the best ways, if you want to follow the work that I'm doing, is my Twitter handle at Andrew L. Seidel, Seidel. FFRF's Twitter handle is simpler. It's at FFRF. I'm also on Facebook. Again, Andrew L. Seidel. Same thing on Instagram, which I've been doing lately. So those are probably the best ways to reach out, see me. I announce, my speaking engagements usually on those platforms. And FFRF, of course, has 9 attorneys on staff. We all go around the country and speak. Our co-presidents, Dan Barker and Annie Laurie Gaylor, also do so. And I mean, the best way to keep up with what FFRF is doing, which is obviously far more than I am doing, is to become a member. I mean, it's $40 a year. You help defend that wall of separation between state and church, which is, critical to so many of the rights and issues that we care about. So please join us. We need all the help we can get right now.
Great. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for the work that you do. And I appreciate you coming on to the Phil Ferguson Show.
Phil, always a pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
But there was one performance this year that stunned me. It sank its hooks in my heart. Not because it was good. There was nothing good about it. But it was effective and it did its job. It made its intended audience laugh and show their teeth. It was that moment when the person asking to sit in the most respected seat in our country imitated a disabled reporter, someone he outranked in privilege, power, and the capacity to fight back. It kind of broke my heart when I saw it, and I still can't get it out of my head because it wasn't in a movie. It was real life. And this instinct to humiliate, when it's modeled by someone in the public platform, by someone powerful, it filters down into everybody's life because it kind of gives permission for other people to do the same thing. Disrespect invites disrespect. Violence incites violence. When the powerful use their position to bully others, we all lose. Okay, go up with that thing. Okay, this brings me to the press. We need the principled press to hold power to account, to call them on the carpet for every outrage.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
Well, hopefully that was more than enough scary stuff from Andrew Seidel. A lot of work to be done. Of course, you can always become a member of the FFRF like I am, or you can give them a whole bunch of money and become a life member. That's $1,000. And they also have an eternal membership or an afterlife membership, I think it is, for $5,000. Just kind of a play on the afterlife kind of thing, which is kind of cool. But if you don't want to donate to them, my other big fundraiser at the moment is the Secular Student Alliance. And just as a reminder, there's a special page set up. I'm going to give you the link here in a minute. If you go to that page and you sign up for some kind of monthly donations, because one of the problems the Secular Student Alliance has is people will give money and then they need more money later. So monthly giving helps even out their cash flow and allows them to do more planning and better focus with the spending. So we want you to give monthly, and it can just be a couple of bucks. I mean, if you only got $5 a month, then give $5. But I know some of my listeners have more than $5 a month they can spare, or if you're really committed to the cause of helping these students out, because they're going to be the future leaders, and hopefully some of them will be better politicians than the people we have now. We'll just go with that. So here is the link. It is bit.ly/Phil Matches. And Phil, capital P, H-I-L, Matches, capital M-A-T-C-H-E-S. Capital Phil, capital M, Phil Matches. Not the easiest thing for me to say and get across on audio, but go check it out. I also have the link on the post from on the Facebook page and from last week's show. I don't have a total yet. They're going to get that to me in the next couple of days, and then hopefully I can have updates with each podcast. Whatever is donated on a monthly basis, then times 12 months. So what you might donate and what all of you might donate over a period of a year, I will then match up to $10,000. So this is a chance for all of us collectively to raise $20,000 for the Secular Student Alliance. As a reminder, this show is free. I don't even have a Patreon page. Yes, in a way, it's shamelessly self-promotional, and I get new clients this way. I make money this way, and this is my way to pay back to the community and things that I support. So go check out that website, bit.ly/Phil Matches, capital P, capital M. And that wraps it up for the show. Like I said, in a couple of months, I will be in Las Vegas for SciCon, and then 2 weeks after that in San Francisco for the FFRF convention. If you go to one of those, or both, please feel free to say hi. I look forward to meeting you in person. Until then, ciao.